Hello and welcome. I'm Mandy Pretty, and I'm here with my amazing aunt, Linda Tellington-Jones, and we're back to chat because you got, when you have had a lifetime like Linda, it's worth recording some of these amazing experiences and memories. So we left off with you having started the Feldenkrais training with Moshe in San Francisco, and then alternating between summers doing that course and the rest of the year in Germany. And right. I think you had at this point started, the seed had been planted, and you were developing what we now know as the Tellington TTouch method. And you were in the development phase, spending a lot of time with different horses in Germany. But one of the things you mentioned was Roger Russell. And I don't think we got the full story about how he came into your life, other than he seemed like he was involved in the training, the Feldenkrais training. And, but I mean, I didn't even realize what an integral part he really was at this point in your life. So you got to spill the tea. Let us know.
Right. Well, Roger was, let's see, I think 11 years younger than I think, yes, approximately. And I had
he's only in his 70s now, so he's like a youngster.
That's right. And he remembers everything. I just had this long conversation with him 2 days ago for over an hour, and I simply couldn't remember that I'd lost 4 years when we were in Germany.
Wow.
And the amazing things that we did. So I want to tell some of these stories. It's really great. I met Roger in a hot tub.
Was the 70s, I guess, Linda.
Right. At Esalen Institute. It was just incredible. And they had these hot springs, and at Esalen they had made these hot tubs, and you were just like on the cliffs above the ocean, 1,000 feet below. It was absolutely stunning. And up on the other side were the mountains. So it's mountains on one side, down to the water on the other side.
Big Sur, so beautiful.
I met Roger, and I can't remember our discussion that night, but actually we were quite interesting in a hot tub with a group of people. And the discussion was about one of the senators, Scott somebody or it might have been Senator Scott, who was talking about how they were finally going to release the information to the public about the UFO activity and how much the American government knew about it. And I'm telling you all that just right now in Washington, I have a friend who is doing a whole thing on that, thinking that, not realizing that they were talking about that in what year was that? That had to be
76?
75? No, 2 or 3.
Oh, it was earlier. Oh, right.
Yes.
Well, didn't they, I think last year or the year before, come out with some, that there was, for sure, like they admitted that there was known intelligence on UFOs?
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what, the point is that if you don't understand it or know about it, you just, it's not in the reality of the average person. So it's never going to get out in a way that greets people. Anyway, we were in this hot tub having this hot discussion. And then I was down there doing I think it was a 6-day workshop with Ilana Rubenfeld. And Roger was in the class. And the next day, we were asked to choose partners to do some sort of, exercise that we were doing. So I just waited, and Roger chose me. And actually, come to think of it, that was before the hot tub. And so we started having this conversation. And for me, what really attracted me about Roger, I asked him how he felt about God. And we had this big discussion because I'd met a number of people who either didn't believe in God or had very different beliefs than I. So we had this really long discussion. And it turned out that there was listen, you all, you're really going to get this. There was somebody also in that class who was talking about, she was from Ireland, and she was talking about fairies and talking about people who have these little lights in their eyes are part of the fairy kingdom. And so I thought, I think I'm part of the fairy kingdom. I know that because I had done this little process, at Esalen. I also taught Feldenkrais classes. And in the beginning, when I was introducing later TTouch, I also taught TTouch classes. And so I took the children out one day because they had a wonderful school for kids who lived there at Esalen. And I took them out to find fairies. And it was such an interesting experience because they were under 6 years old at that point. And so we were looking in the leaves and imagining these fairies. And when we were walking back, one of the things I remember, we were walking up the hill and there was a group of Esalen guests coming down the hill. And one little girl was walking along like this with her hands cupped. And somebody stopped her and said, "Oh, what have you got?" And she said, "Shh, I've got fairies and they're sleeping." So sweet. And the thing is, for those of you, just listen to this a moment. Oh dear, where is my fairy book? Oh, hold on, right here. So, this is a book that we put together, and they're called Voices of Nature. And it's like poems from fairies and trees and stars and the breeze. And these are messages that came to me over the years. And this is the first entry, Fairies and Angels. And it's fairies and angels. Are they the same? Each have their own realm and play their own game. Their duties are different, although they both fly. Fairies tend nature. Angels tend you and I. And I have many very wonderful messages in here from fairies that are really fun. So,
did those all come like over the years? Did you collect them in your journal?
Yes.
The poems? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're all, and many of them are actually from one trip that I did in Australia in '84 when I was planting, little trees in the rainforest. It's a whole other story. So, where was I?
So Roger, you taught the class, or no, you were in the class together.
This is the deal. So because we were talking about fairies with this other person in the class, and I thought, you know what? I have to go to Ireland. I have to experience the fairies because she had come from places in Ireland where everybody talked about the fairies. So I decided to fly just for a short trip to Ireland and find the fairies. And Roger decided he wanted to go with me. So we flew to Ireland and can't remember where we landed, but took a train and went somewhere and stopped in a village. Like I had no plan. I was really flying by the seat of my pants or my wings, and met up with some folks. And then I realized, I'm not supposed to be in the fairy kingdom in this lifetime. That's the past. That's not who I am now. So I turned around and went back.
I love it. And I mean, you got to think about that in the 70s. I mean, it would be kind of wild to do that now, but now everyone walks around with a computer in their hand. If you need to like find the nearest like hotel or order a car. I mean, it was so different then. You just like everything was paper.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. That's that sense of adventure though. I feel like, my husband Walt pointed this out to me years ago that like you're just so fearless. You've never thought that you couldn't do something. Like, why not? If you wanted to do it, of course you could do it. And I think that's probably some of the reason you've done such amazing things throughout your life. You haven't let fear hold you back.
Well, you're the same way.
Well, it's a slightly different level, but I love hearing the stories like that. So when you and Roger went to Ireland, is this before you started the Feldenkrais training?
Oh, way before.
Okay.
Yeah.
So see, I didn't even realize you were with Roger before you started the training with Moshe.
Well, so what happened then when we came back from that trip, I was at the airport and my sister picked me up, Robin, who was working and living with me at that time. And I thought, that's interesting. So where's Birch? And I thought he was going to pick me up.
So you were still married to Birch at this point?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got to get the timeline straight, Linda.
All right. So I get home. This is going to be interesting. Some of you, I'm sure something like this has happened to some of you, but not to everyone. So I get home and there's a note in the bed. And I thought, oh. And I read the note and I wish I had kept it. And the note said, I finally know what it is to live. And I thought, oh God, he slept with a virgin. I'm serious. That's what I thought. I'm not kidding.
That's your first thought about your husband, that's like his, like,
yes,
going to be his crowning achievement in life.
So the thing is that I had hired his ex-girlfriend, and because I needed another person in the barn, and so he had, while I was away, hooked up with her, and they'd moved out. And the thing is that I knew that she needed a job, and I knew that, I mean, Birch and I were not, we were.
It wasn't a huge heartbreak for you.
Well, no, it's not a heartbreak at all. The actuality, what I recently told you before we started recording, I had married him at Countess Margaret Bessigny's suggestion as a consort to me. And, Hungarians are used to that. I mean, it's a very different scene. It's not
it was the 70s,
it wasn't a love match, for heaven's sake. I could help him because he couldn't, he needed support because he was working for the Paralympics.
Mm.
That's why he, was learning to ride, and he was really good. So
he was a para rider?
Not a Paralympics. I'm sorry, not a Paralympics.
Oh.
The
pentathlon. Was it pentathlon? Was it?
Okay,
yeah, sorry. That was somewhere in my head. I had that memory. I knew that.
That's a whole other thing. We have to do a whole section. Yeah. Paralympics and what we did there for all the countries.
Not the Paralympics, the Olympics.
The Paralympics.
Oh, I see. We're going another. See, you have so many tangents we can go in any direction, Linda. This is why we're recording it.
Anyway,
so remember.
Right.
So Birch left a letter, really classy. It's like the equivalent of ending it in a text.
So, I mean, for me, it was fine.
Yeah.
I was really happy, to tell you the truth.
Bit of a relief.
It was a great relief, yes. And so anyway, I called him and I said, look, you don't have to leave, because I knew that he needed support to work for the pentathlon. And so anyway, I invited them, because we had a really big house, like 5 bedrooms. And so I invited him and Cheryl to come back, and nobody knew. They were living in a whole other bedroom in our house, of course.
Kind of kept him out of your hair, Frank, probably, really. You didn't have to deal with him then.
It was a useful arrangement.
Totally, yeah.
And certainly it worked for me. It was okay, because he rode our polo horses, and, the Hungarian, Margaret Bessigny's Hungarian polo horses, and we rode at Pebble Beach, and it was a really good thing. So anyway.
So Russell was still around, though, at this time?
No, Roger had gone off. Roger Russell had gone home. So then when Birch moved out, I called Roger and I said, would you like to come out and spend some time here? And because I'd closed down the school and was running West Wind Hungarian Horse Farm for Margaret Bessigny, promoting her horses.
Where was Roger based at that point?
Colorado. He was
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And he'd saved up money working the stock market. That's how he could come with me to Ireland.
Right. So then he came to visit you.
So he came to visit and to stay and just hang out. And so it was quite interesting, because he was very intellectual. I mean, I really loved his mind and all the possibility we had for really discussions.
Did he ride?
No, he didn't ride. Yeah. Your mother taught him to ride.
Oh.
Because, of course, he wanted to learn to ride, because we were there at the stable. And it doesn't work well to teach your boyfriend to ride. No. So Robin taught him to ride.
So you sent your little sister on the mission.
Of course, she did a great job. And so where am I with Roger? So when I decided that I could no longer take this, what I was seeing as a lack of recognition of the incredible gifts that horses give to us in our lives. There was no heart connection at all in the horse world in those days. And so I decided I've got to find out what I really came to the planet to do. And that's when I was thinking I need to stop teaching, which I've been doing for, my whole life. At that point, I was 35. And that's when I went to the dean of the adult education and
At Santa Cruz, UC Santa Cruz.
Right. Because I had been teaching adult training classes at our places. We had a beautiful place with a sit-down places up in that loft in the barn that was really beautiful for 100 people for lectures. And we filled those.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked him, I said, I think I'm supposed to quit doing this horse business and maybe get a PhD in animal behavior or something. And so I have some degree. And this is where he said, and he was a Japanese, and he said, Linda, people who come to university don't know yet necessarily what they want to do. He said, you know what you came to, just go out and find it. And that's when I decided to go to Europe and just go around the world for, see what came to me. And of course, I'd been invited back to Europe by Ursula Bruns. And so the first thing that Roger and I did was go and visit Ursula. And then that's when she said, she was just to remind you, she was the publisher of Fright Side and Saddle, and she had come and spent several weeks with me 2 years before that at our ranch in
Badger?
At Badger, and stayed with us actually in Los Altos Hills.
Oh, right.
And I showed her all the horse world, which was so different because in those years in Germany, the horses didn't have paddocks. They all were kept in stalls. And she went back and through her magazine and through her connections with the government, started this business of open stalls for horses where they could go in and out, and started so much. And then she saw us actually riding and jumping with no bridles. And that she went back and developed this whole Bruns Bear method of riding with neck rings on an oval ring so that the riders.
Am I wrong? I think I remember at Raykin, they had the little tracks. So the horses, when people were learning to ride, they had different size tracks. So the horses riders that were new could ride the horses with a neck ring. So they'd learn to balance without hanging on the horses' heads. Right. Yeah, no, I mean, pretty revolutionary to start, this is decades and decades ago, right? To start this sort of program.
Totally revolutionary.
Especially in the like climate of sort of traditional German riding schools.
Right. Yeah. Totally. But one of the things that influenced her was while she was, stayed with me, I sent her around to different places to meet people. And one of the things, she went to meet Donna and Pat Fitzgerald. And Pat was the leading endurance rider. Both of them were like top 100-mile in one day endurance riders and winners. And so Pat offered Ursula Bruns a horse to ride in the 100-mile in one day endurance. Wow. And she called me and she said, Linda, do you think I should do this? And I said, look, why don't you just start, and you could go from station, to vet station to vet station and decide how far you want to go. It'll be a great experience of being in the mountains. And so when she got on the horse, the way Germans traditionally ride is what I saw in the beginning years in the 60s, horrifying. And it's what I call the hang and bang, hang on their mouth, and literally their legs were going constantly, or they're just so tight. So anyway, first thing Pat Fitzgerald said, what I want you to do in posting, instead of her gripping the horse, I want you to push out on your stirrups with each posting trot, so she couldn't bang on the horse. And
I assume it's quite a sensitive Arabian she was riding.
Yes,
as well. So
leave her head alone, and she actually finished.
Wow! And I assume she'd never done any distance riding before.
No, but she rode like almost.
Oh, sure, I know, but riding 100 miles.
Never 100 miles, and she wasn't conditioned.
Yeah.
And I have to check this out, but I'm quite sure she came in the top 10.
Wow!
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing.
It was really, really interesting. Yes. So after she'd been at my school, then I went back to stay with her, and she said that she, based on what we call the balance seat style of riding, she would like to start an official German riding school with the opposite of what they were teaching there, and have me lead it. And I said, look, I'll give you 1 year because I wanted out of the horse world. I had no idea what I was really supposed to be doing. And so Roger, who of course was with me, he thought, because we had done one Feldenkrais with Esalen, that changed my whole way of being. I mean, it influences how I am today. And the fact that still at almost 90, I can get up and down off the floor like
or get on a horse and ride when you don't ride regularly. Like, I mean, I think that's so amazing.
Right. Yes. And so Roger decided, based on that one Feldenkrais lesson, that he could learn the Feldenkrais method and teach it in this school, balance seat style.
I mean, and that in itself, I mean, there's lots of people now incorporating Feldenkrais into riding, but like that's very forward thinking, that he kind of connected the dots that way, especially as not being like a long time rider, like how much influence it would have over riders.
Yeah, he wasn't really thinking about it as riders, as human beings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
As athletes.
Yeah.
And so what was so interesting is he wrote to Moshe Feldenkrais in Israel, and he was told that unless he spoke Hebrew, he would not be able to attend. But that Moshe was teaching a class, a 3-year, then 3 summer class at the Humanistic Psychology Institute in San Francisco. And so then we got this brochure, and I took one look at it, and I thought, I'm supposed to do that. And so I called Went, my ex-husband, my first husband, and we were friends until the day he died. And I asked him if he would call the head of the school and see if he could get me in, because I didn't know what your prerequisites would have to be clear. So I got in, and then Roger then finally got a message back, because I had called. I wasn't called Linda Tellington Phones or Linda Tellington or
Telephone Jones, Linda Telephone Jones. So I think the last session that we chatted about, you talked about sort of that like little seed that had been planted when you started the Feldenkrais session yourself, and that you and Roger, when you went back during the non-summer months, when school was out of session and went back to Germany, you'd started doing these trainings and workshops with horses and seeing huge results with all these pieces you'd put together.
Yeah, well, in San Francisco, as I mentioned before, like at the second day of the training is when I got the idea.
Yeah.
If a human can learn in one experience, that's got to be true for a horse. And what can I do to move a horse in these non-habitual ways, And I want to point this out again. And I did the same exercises that we've been doing for 15 years as part of my grandfather's work on massage on horses, but never with the intention of activating new neural pathways so the horse could learn, have more potential for learning. And I realize now, Mandy, after all these years, it was the intention, this energy of the thought or the belief that, could this be possible, to activate these neural pathways? And that really makes a difference. The beautiful thing about this work that we've developed over the years, the Tellington TTouch, is that you don't have to know about intention. You don't even have to know how it works. You just have to do these 1 1/4 circles. And it's like a homeopathic knowing, proving in that spiral circle that will reduce pain and fear in yourself or in an animal. That's the thing. It's so incredible about it. But it was that one sentence from Moshe that just made me prick up my ears, and that's what started us. And then Roger and I went out that first, he said it was the weekend. I thought it was the first.
Oh, when you worked on Ted's mare.
Work on Ted's mare. Yeah.
So,
And
I mean, you took it so quickly, and started applying it, which is pretty amazing. And then when you guys went back to Germany, you started developing and exploring what, into a method? I mean, because that's the thing, right? You did all these things, but did you, when did it really compartmentalize?
So when it started, let's just think. That summer, we'd already figured out, stumbled upon just exploring, going over or around poles and bending the horse and how that affected their brain. So we had the start of the labyrinth. And also I discovered, oh my gosh, by lowering the horse's head with intention, we could actually override the flight, the fear. And we didn't know that we were putting them in the parasympathetic.
Right.
That mentioned for another 25, 30 years.
Well, and I think you've always, lots of different people lower the head in lots of different ways, but I feel like your intention of lowering the head or just pressure and then release, they learn they have to put their head down so the pressure will be released. I really feel like because your intention has always been like lowering that head and helping to encourage relaxation rather than it just being this only about the trained cue, there's such a different feeling of, again, that feeling of safety, that the animal can feel safe about doing it. And then that changes the whole state of the nervous system.
Absolutely. It was, and they have trust in. And what was done in those days is the Western trainers would tap a horse with a bat,
a crop,
crop with a leather thing, tap them. But it was a reaction that they lower the head.
Yeah.
But they didn't have the relaxation. And it was years later that I discovered, wait a minute, when a horse is ewe-necked, and oh my God, how many ewe-necked horses I worked with. And you know how it is. There's every kind of gadget you can imagine to put those ewe-necked horses on so they're not ewed. But they're always under restriction, either
still
with
tension.
And the other thing that they did in the Western world, they would take a light rein and tie it from the curb bit to the hocks. So that the horse would, just keep that head down. And as long as that head is down, they can't react. They can't resist. It's really terrible, actually, because they're just like out of it. And this discovery, and I wish I could remember how I got it. I can't remember the day I got it. When I realized that if I bring the back up, suddenly the head drops. And that is such a game changer. You cannot imagine, because then the head drops and then you take the neck and you rock it a little. And when you do that, everything frees up. And then you take the tail and then circle the legs. All this stuff that we do that just came piece after piece, like the mouth, the fact that, that you can affect a horse's behavior by working around the mouth the way we do. That was because of a lecture in our 5th summer. It was an advanced training in the Feldenkrais work when an Israeli neurologist had come and spoken to us about newborn infants when they have a unusual way of holding the mouth. There's some neurological thing going on. And I found later, working with like 4-month-old babies who don't suckle, all you have to do is then and gently work the tongue and give them a new feeling. And that came from working on this, 4-month-old orangutan in the San Diego Zoo.
Oh, well. All these little like threads. I guess it's, that all just connect and bring new pieces together. Yeah. So you also, because in March, it'll be also a big anniversary for you being at Equitana, the biggest horse trade show in the world, right? Is it, because you'd started going to Equitana quite early on in your time in Germany, right?
1975.
Right, kind of early on. And you introduced trail horse classes? Is that right?
No, the first year we introduced, Ursula Bruns had us take Roger, myself, and 2 teenagers from Ursula Bruns, and we worked with them till we could ride in quadrille with no bridles, jumping against each other and, 4 abreast. And
this is Roger, who only learned to ride a few years prior.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was really good.
Yeah, no, I think it's great though, right? Because
Yeah, absolutely. And so after that, what happened is then people wanted to know more about what I did. And that's when I started doing workshops. And the first workshop was
was that the one where no one spoke English?
That's the one where no one spoke English.
And you didn't speak German yet.
Not a word.
Yeah.
And so I learned 10 words,
Yeah.
and we had a great weekend.
Well, because I got to think, because riding kind of bridleless would have been so out there. I mean, a lot of people ride without a bridle now. It's not such a big deal, but it's great. But, it wouldn't have been like then, like that was pretty radical.
But they'd never seen it before.
Well, that's what I mean. Like that was groundbreaking.
And the thing is, for many of us, who rode horses from the time we were children, it was normal to do that. You just stick a halter on and throw, a lead rope and ride down from the pasture. I used to do it from the time I was like maybe 7 or 8 years old. I would jump on without a halter, and the horse would go down to the barn.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, totally radical, Mandy.
Yeah.
One of the magazine's write a review, who became my friend over the years, they wrote, "Oh my God, this is the most dangerous thing that's ever been introduced in Germany. So many riders are going to be killed." And the fact is, everybody does it. Now, when you go to Equitana, every breed, every discipline will have at least one really beautiful bridleless class or presentation.
Yeah.
It's made a huge deal.
Totally.
And the thing that's interesting, then the following year, I went back to Equitana. I bought a really beautiful 6-year-old quarter horse mare named Bob Brixa, who was a champion trail horse competitor.
Did you bring her over from the U.S.?
We flew her from California to Equitana. And then I gave the first introduction to trail horses. And then I was asked to do trail horse classes. And that's when of course, in the trail horse, you have all these sideways over poles, turning sideways through gates, backing through these complex patterns. And that's when I started. It's the first time ever. And Roger and I were just talking about that, because until then, all the trainings that I did were in the saddle, nothing on the ground. And because of that trail horse class, where I must have had at least 10 really nice quarter horses in it, and then other warm bloods and there was one Icelandic, and he was really dangerous. And so I did not want him bolting with her in this ring.
Yeah.
And so I had her get off and lead him through everything. And then when she went home, he got a cough and he still couldn't be ridden. And so she kept doing the exercises, and she wrote to me later. And when she finally got back on him, he had no reactivity, no bolting, no fear.
And I feel like kind of groundwork wasn't as common as it is now. Like lots of people have lots of different kinds of groundwork. I mean, I feel like in the 70s, the only groundwork anyone might have done was if they did some really classical in-hand work, but very different.
Only lunging or double lunge work. There was nothing done in hand before that. And that's when it all started. And I mean, we had a huge influence on that in Europe. And
so is Equitana where you met the Icelandics? Because Icelandics weren't really they weren't very many in North America, so you would have met them in Germany.
No. I definitely. The thing is, when I'm thinking I would have met them the year before, because Ursula had imported the first Icelandics into Germany and the year before I shut down the school, after Ursula had spent the time with me, I went back another summer. It must have been the summer of maybe 73 or 2, even. I don't know which year. Anyway, I went back and spent a month with her, and she took me all around, and she took me to her place in Reykjavik, and she had the Salty. He was the first Icelandic horse that she had imported, and he had no brakes.
Right. Well, a lot of the horses from Iceland in the early days didn't have brakes.
Brakes, right.
I mean, it's interesting now because lots of people might not know. I mean, Icelandics, there are more Icelandics in Germany than there were for a long time, any other single breed. I mean, there's a lot of free.
Really?
There were for a long time, because there's lots of different warm blood registries, but there were more Icelandics than any other single breed in Germany. So, I mean, there's lots of Iceland, they're a very popular breed in Germany.
So, and so Ursula Bruns was the first to import them. So she wanted me to ride Salty. And she said, now,
No brakes.
and we were out in the country by Reykjavik, and they had these beautiful dirt roads, sand roads, totally no cars on them, really safe. And she said, just take him and head him down this and feel out what it's like to tolt. And he had this beautiful flying tolt. And then, but I couldn't stop him. And she said, the way you stop him, you whistle. So first of all, I can't whistle. And second of all, when the wind is coming, how is this horse who is going like crazy down the road, way faster than a Paso? So I put him into a bush and stopped him. And then we came flying back and he stopped against the horses. And that was it. I mean, so interesting. And that's when I got really interested in Icelandics. And I did many, many trainings in Germany with Icelandic horses, just getting them over this fight, flight, incredible fear thing. Because they would, very common thing for an Icelandic to go, the way they're trained in Iceland, to go into freeze. And when they break out of freeze, they're gone and they're not there.
Well, and they're so unassuming because on the ground, they're very, cute and tend to be very reasonable. I think they can be not trick you, but people can be surprised that they can get, the old style where you could get on and have zero brakes.
But it was so terrible because all they would do is throw a saddle on a horse and lead them between two other horses with a rider.
Right.
And they're terrified.
Totally. Yeah, they don't. Yeah.
And it's not typical of the breed when you handle them as though they can understand, which they can. They're never like that. Never have a problem.
So it was 1976. Somehow you got involved with the bicentennial, the Great American Horse Race, right? To celebrate the bicentennial of the United States. Now, were you involved with that because you'd had so much to do with the competitive trail riding and endurance riding in the U.S.? Is that how you were connected to it?
Right, because, I had been in the top 10 twice on the 100-mile Tevis Cup ride. And I've been actually, I think until today, the only person who has taken 4 junior riders through together and have them finish together 15th.
Wow.
Plus I also set a record on the Jim Shoulders 100-mile, that stood for 7 years until Pat Fitzgerald came along and broke it.
Wow. So
anyway,
the Great American Horse Race was New York to California? Across the continent.
Yeah, to Sacramento. Yeah.
Oh, it was to Sacramento. Yeah.
And I was asked to be the international, what was it? Coordinator.
Yeah.
Coordinator. So, so Roger and I were actually, he just told me this 2 days ago. I totally forgot. We'd been invited to go with a couple of friends just for a weekend to Paris for vacation. And the Beckers they had 300 Icelandic horses and they'd been friends for years and years. And so I stopped by and told them about this race. And I thought, what would you think about riding across America to promote the Icelandic horses? And they thought this is, nobody thought anything. And we were only there like for an evening and then we went on to Paris. And when we came back through, Roger told me this 2 days ago, that Klaus said, Linda, tell us more about this race across the United States. And
the Beckers still have Icelandics today, right? Their son runs the farm?
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Yes. Hundreds. I just talked to Ula like last week. Rode across the United States. And so what's really interesting, so we had riders. So Klaus decided they wanted to do this, but they wanted to invite some other Icelandic horse friends. And so they invited Walter Feltman from Germany and
Johannes Hoyes from Austria.
and Max Intermauer from Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
So they had this big meeting. I mean, this is epic. Well, because they had this big meeting and we'd already bought horses.
Oh, wow. From Iceland or from Germany?
All over Germany.
Oh, wow.
And we had these horses ready to go, but the riders then had to decide, could they make this investment in it, or could we take a chance and get Iceland to back it? So that's a bit of a longer story, but Iceland eventually did back it for 25,000. But we had all these riders together, and we met till 2 a.m. And I was sleeping up in the barn. They had a sleeping quarters above one of the barns, and Roger and I were up there. And we go to bed at 2, still not making the decision, are they going to go across the United States? And we already had the agreement from the Icelandic agricultural department to give the money. And so at 6 a.m, the phone rings up in the barn, and I answer it, and it's another neighbor who was also at that meeting, because he's another big Icelandic horse person. And he said, Linda, are you going to the meeting? Because I had called them together because it was a deadline. There was a meeting that was happening in New York City, and they were going to said to have a lot of press there. And we should really be there to give the promotion for the Icelandic horses. But nobody had agreed to do it, and they didn't want to pay me to go. So Kurt said, I think you should go. So I jumped out of bed at 6:30 a.m. I jumped in the car. I drove to Luxembourg, got on a plane, and landed in New York, got my hair done, and made it to the press release in time. And at that, we have to show this picture because there's a half page in the...
I've never seen the picture. So yes, we do have to find the picture.
Well, it's not a picture. It's the newspaper.
Yeah.
Half a page of the newspaper in the New York Times.
Wow.
Me on a horse leading 2 other horses on the map of the United States.
That's
And
wild. So that was quite a commitment, like for the riders. Is it 6 weeks that they did it? Is that right?
6 weeks. Yeah.
Right. And then, so they ended up doing it, obviously.
Right. And so that's a whole other story. Oh my God.
I had kind of forgot about what a big thing it is. So my parents helped you. So you convinced Robin and Phil to crew.
Yeah. And so anyway, first of all, we had to get these horses now to the United States, get them to California, where I was going to train them for 6 weeks before, and which we did. And Mandy, you didn't know that my mother, your grandmother, came and rode with us.
I did actually know that because my very first horse was part of that group, Borkor.
Oh, really?
And I was, the little pictures where I'm trotting along at 18 months on my horse. That was Borkor.
Yeah.
He lived into his 30s. He made it.
Yeah, he went across the United States. And the thing is, I can't find that picture now. Mom came and rode with us.
I remember hearing about that. I mean, the Great American Horse Race and my parents being the crew on that is the reason I never camped as a child, because it rained most of the time and they had to set up and take down a wet camp for 6 weeks. So that's at least that's Phil's excuse that we never went camping.
Oh, I can believe it. So they bought a mail truck.
Yeah.
With the open door.
Right-hand drive.
Yeah. Right, and drove it across the United States.
Yeah.
And we set up these, they had vet checks every night. And I was in the Feldenkrais training Monday through Thursday. So I would jump on a plane Thursday night and fly to wherever they were and join them for the weekend and then fly back.
I heard some pretty wild stories along the way.
There were
some wild ones. But I mean, I had kind of forgotten about that you really spearheaded that. And then Robin and Phil took home 6 Icelandics from that. My poor dad, who grew up in the city, didn't know what he was getting involved with, right? When he met my mother.
No, that's for sure.
That's fun. So they did that. And then you continued to be doing trainings in Germany through this time with Roger, like for the next couple of years.
Well, for 5 years, we went back for the summer for trainings. And actually, we did some wild things during those summers that Roger totally reminded me of. I mean, one thing that we did, we brought back like $12,000, which is quite a bit in those days, of Indian jewelry, really spectacular, really original, really beautiful Indian jewelry that we sold at Equitana. And
Is that where that turquoise cuff I have from you? It was like a Navajo style Hopi. Maybe it was.
no, it is, it's Hopi, and it's really spectacular. No,
Yeah, it
that's
is.
not from that.
Mm,
I had a lot of really beautiful
you
Indian
did.
jewelry.
You do have a little, yeah. So did Roger keep his place in Colorado during this time? Like through the 70s? Because you had said you'd remembered that you'd bought some horses somehow in your spare time.
Let me think how that was. Let me see if I can. I think when I decided to, I sold all the horses at Westwind.
Mhm.
All the Hungarians went back to Montana, to Margaret's beautiful ranch, 5,000-acre ranch in Montana. And then, which you can read about in Shannon's book, Strike a Long Trot, about my school and my life. And then, so then I had been I was flying, trying to think it's somehow I was on the East Coast, and it could have been that no, I couldn't have been. Yes, I could have been staying one time, actually, because during those years that I was the director of the Westwind Hungarian Horse Farm, Margaret Besnier, about at least twice a year, would say, Linda, I think you're working too much. I think you should get on a plane and come back. And either she would bring me to Maryland, to her beautiful historic center in Maryland, or to the ranch in Montana. And so one time when I was flying back from the East Coast, I stopped to see a friend in Crested Butte, Colorado. And it was this little amazing town with like one main street, dirt road, wonderful shops at 9,000 feet in the Rockies. And I just loved it. And I thought, what the heck? There was a house for sale for $6,000 down. And I rented it for the payments, paid for the payments every month. And a couple of, I don't know when later, I was flying back again, and there was a second house, and I bought it too, same price. I mean, can you believe that? We eventually sold it. I sold it for $75,000, and that was my down payment on my house in Carmel.
Oh yeah, Carmel. Oh yeah. So this is before you met Roger, though, or was this while you were with Roger?
Roger was with me. Yeah.
Oh right.
And so we were driving one time from California to Colorado with a bunch of stuff to take to that first house. And we're driving along the coast of California, and there was this fallen down old redwood board barn. And we found the owners, and we bought the lumber, loaded it in my 4-horse van, and drove it to Colorado. And Roger did all of he redid the attic in the house, and we just did a lot of stuff with that wood.
I bet your dad would have loved that.
Yeah.
That would have been right up Hoodie's alley, I think.
Absolutely. Yes, he would have loved it. So those are some of the amazing things that we did.
Wow. So you moved, you really were you guys were just, wherever you wanted to be, you went.
That's right.
And so that's probably why you just both felt comfortable just moving to Germany for most of the year.
Well, how that happened, Mandy, when my intention of shutting down was to actually go around the world and find out what it was I was supposed to do. And the first thing I was intending to do, and Roger just reminded me of it, I didn't remember, he was planning to go I was going to go for 6 months to Zaire.
This was during the rainy season, right? It was the rainy season. Yeah, you mentioned, yeah.
But I was going to be with a woman who was filming gorillas in Zaire. And she had been in my class when she was 6 years old at Chadwick.
Yeah.
And I taught her to ride when she was 6. We used to do these jumping competitions over, things like jump
Oh.
6 inches.
Yeah, and
And
that's why you'd ended up staying in Germany longer than you planned, because the African trip didn't end up panning out as planned.
an African trip fell through. And I know Roger was planning to go and meet Phil because Phil, your dad, had our van or something. I can't remember. Yeah, I think he had our van that we left with him in California because we were originally going to take it to Africa.
Oh, and drive overland, do an overlander tour.
Yeah, that was.
Wow.
I mean, listen, you all. I mean, all these things that happened. So anyway, when I couldn't go to Zaire for the winter, that's when Ursula Bruns said, "Linda, I want you to make a presentation for Equitana." And so we had maybe a couple of months then to put it together. This jump with neck rings.
Yeah, that was the first Equitana. Yeah. And then so you ended up just spending the next couple of years when you weren't doing your Feldenkrais training primarily in Germany teaching this
Totally.
new method that you had developed and were developing.
But first, there was no new method. The first one I did after Equitana, I just taught what I've been teaching forever.
No, I know, but when we'd kind of mentioned, I think on our last chat. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But then what happened, then as I did the Feldenkrais training, we started developing more and more possibilities of helping riders from their bodies and then from the saddle. And then from the stuff we were doing on the ground, we just kept doing these wonderful workshops that was a combination for the Feldenkrais for the rider and all this stuff we were doing with horses with the groundwork. And that's what eventually we'll get into how it came to develop a method like in 79. It was, typical. I'll just tell you what impressed Ursula Bruns. We were talking about this. Roger reminded me of one horse that was brought to me, and I was doing trainings at Racon, Ursula Bruns's center in Racon. She had a research center. It was amazing. And it was a horse that they said was really stubborn, and he'd been really gotten after, and he still wouldn't come forward when you led him. And Roger remembered that I took one look at him. I remember he was really high-headed, and just watching his eyes and his ears, I said, I don't think he sees well, and I don't think he knows how to go forward because it turned out that he'd been with a friend, and his friend had died, and he was always following that horse everywhere. So that's, when we just did the dingo with him and taught him to come forward from a signal and trust us to come forward, the horse completely changed. And he changed his name from Bad Eyes to I don't remember what, but he wasn't a bad horse and he wasn't stubborn. He couldn't see. And that's what Roger remembers of so many of the horses that had terrible reputations. And then Ursula Bruns saw that, and that's when we're going to do another whole session on it.
Totally. Well, it does, for horses are so generous, animals are so generous about doing what we ask them to do for the most part. But so if it's hard for them, I feel like it's up to us to figure out how can we make it easier for them, and showing them what we want. I mean, it's all these small little pieces, because I think all these horses that get labeled stubborn, it's just whatever we're asking is really hard for them for whatever reason.
Or they just don't understand.
Well, that's what I mean. It's hard. It's hard to do something if you don't understand what's being asked.
And it's really interesting. I was just doing an interview with somebody a couple of days ago. And the thing that I said, about this work, the reason I wanted to develop it first was because Ursula Bruns said you had to make a method. But secondly, so that people who don't have the innate ability, natural ability to get along with horses, which many people have, but most people don't have because it takes a lot of experience, that we could simply do these technical steps on the ground and on the body and from the saddle, so that a person with very little experience, when they use these techniques that we developed, can do miracles with horses, because they show them what they want instead of horses being punished for what we don't like about what they do. And it's still to this day, I mean, interesting. I think there are a lot of hurt people around, because I think when horses I think when people beat up horses, it's because they've been abused themselves, and it might not even be physical. It might be that they just were never seen as children, never acknowledged. And that's my goal in the whatever time I have left on this planet, to really, really impress upon people the importance of seeing the individuality of the horse, and how that horse, how you can get a smile and a sparkle in a horse's eyes, acknowledging the individuality, seeing the soul of the horse. Yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
Pretty big. Well, okay, your 70s. A lot happened in the 70s, Linda.
You're 70.
That's
Yes.
good. So I think next time we'll get into that first 6-week long training that you did with
Yeah.
with the group of horses and people.
And I have to actually interview. I really want to get some thoughts from Christine, because in this book, this is the first book that was written about it,
Mhm.
where Ursula took 6,000 pictures of us over this 6 weeks, and then sat me down at the type of computer, I forget what was called in that time.
Word processor or something. I don't know.
It start with C. I can't remember what you call them,
I don't know.
but it's a fancy typewriter. And so and sat me down, and like I always felt, she took me by the scruff of the neck while she'd sit drinking her evening wine, and I would have to type what we did in a day. And the acknowledgements in this book, this is the first book about it, and therefore Christine Schwartz and Brueggemann and Margaret and Bernd Schmidt, and all the work that they did with these horses. So you'll hear what we did in 6 weeks with a lot of really interesting, big problems, horses.
Super. Well, thank you, Linda. See, again, every time I hear stories I've never heard. Details I've never heard. You'd think I'd have heard them all, but I haven't. Not even close.
Not even close. I mean,
I know.
I'm so excited to remember some of them. So
It's great. All right. Well, thank you. And until next time.
until next time.